welcome to the webinar, Digital Workflows for Full Arch Decisions, Decisions, Decisions. This lecture will be presented by Jeff Carlson, CDT, and we are going to begin shortly. And now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce the Jeff Carlson, CDT, Senior Implant Specialist. Jeff has more than 40 years of dental experience with almost 30 years focused on dental implants. Jeff is the primary author of a 300-page fully illustrated cookbook created for restorative dentists, and he's the co-author of a corresponding auxiliary manual. Jeff co-developed a restorative-based training program that has more than 9,000 dental professionals have attended nationally and internationally. As a senior implant specialist for NDX and Sequence, Jeff provides technical chairside support and lectures across the country on immediate loading full arch restorations in Sequence guided prosthetics and the latest advancements in implant technology. And now it is my pleasure to say, take it away, Jeff.
Well, thank you, Jessica. And let's go ahead and go right to Q&A so we're out of time. Hey, everybody. Really appreciate you joining me this evening. And really look forward to this. I want to say right off that this isn't really a how-to step by step. Those of you that have been on my webinars in the past, I try to really give everything very proceduralized, step by step, to help you have very predictable results with many of the different protocols that are, required for this type of full arch rehabilitation. Tonight, though, really is I'm really focusing about decisions. That's why I called it decisions, decisions, decisions. And I think at the end you'll see why the title was probably pretty appropriate. My little quick home due diligence here is to say that I am an employee of NDX and that I'm being paid time and a half for right now. Commercial support, I am financed by National Dentex.
There's no frowny face or thumbs down, Jeff. No
All
time and a half.
right, we're on a roll. Let's stop while we're ahead. Decision making is what tonight is about. So let's talk about, we have a lot of decisions to make tonight, and I appreciate you making the decision to join me first off, and I hope you decide not to run off on me. So we have the decisions that we're going to be talking about, kind of weighing out a little bit of the pros and cons, if you will. For surgery, we're going to be talking about, are we going to be using precision IOS? Is it free-handed, guided, or fully guided modified alternative? Or photogrammetry, will it be incorporated? And if so, how? And kind of the decision of where would it be utilized? We're also then, of course, we have to talk about the restorative. We're going to do the same thing with restorative. We're going to look at, making sure we decide, are we looking at protocols, analog, provisional. I like this one about provisional, who and when. Going to cover that one. That one gets overlooked quite a bit, about the who and the who and when the provisional is delivered and fabricated by, because we have more options than we've ever had before. With all we have with AI and just the technology we have, it's still success on almost any kind of dentistry that we're doing. But especially it's elevated, I feel, when we're talking about full arch or full mouth reconstruction. And that really is about communication. And I love this quote. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it actually has taken place. And that's very true. So we need to keep in mind that we have to still have these dialogues. And my friends, doctors, I'm just sharing with you that you need to be communicating with your laboratories ahead of time. I still hear stories about a lab. We'll get a call and the patient's in the chair and now they're asking questions, or the patient's coming in the next day and they're asking questions. I'm going to talk about some of the timelines for you make decisions about when you're reaching out to the lab, but you need to have a really high level of communication with your team, with your patient, with the laboratory, with your implant manufacturers, anyone that's going to be involved in this process. So I really like this slide a lot, and I've used it for many, many years. So when we talk about communication to the laboratory, the decisions really, you need to have a communication with them ahead of time. You need to understand, the lab needs to understand, what is what equipment are you using? What version of it? What brand are you using? Because there's a lot of nuances to some of the, especially if you're using an older version, maybe more than like 3 years old for your iOS unit, that might need a lot of modifications, some little tricks and techniques for it. Even some of the newer ones, there's still some things, times you have to need to turn off the AI. Maybe you should go to a modeling mode, different things. But these are communication things to have with your laboratory ahead of time, not at the day of. Um, just and also appointment scheduling, very important. What's the time frame between it? Because not all labs are going to be the same. Even within our network of laboratories, they're not all the same. And also the required preliminary records. Um, Most of the labs that are doing a lot of this are pretty similar. I think a lot of synergy on what we're looking for from the clinician to be able to provide you and your patient with the optimum results. So these are things that we want to know about too. Are you going to be doing analog, a combination of digital and analog, or and completely digital? There's going to be some pros and cons to going completely digital. And those are things you should talk with the laboratory and work any of those details out ahead of time. So again, talking about the surgery, looking at decisions that we're going to have to make. So how do we choose? How do you choose um, some of the things I'm going to be sharing with you? And it's going to be based upon your surgical experience. It's going to be, on your laboratory experience, your laboratory support, even the patient physiology. How they present might may a different approach to, how you're going to do a case. You may like to be doing freehand. If you have a patient that's very compromised, let's say with limited bone, or the morphology of the bone is where you have to be spot on. I mean, you cannot be off in any way, shape, or form. Well, then maybe guided surgery would be probably a good idea on that particular case, even though maybe you typically do freehanded. Photogrammetry, it's not required. There's definitely a lot of pluses to it. We're not going to go into a lot of detail on that. I'm working on a next presentation. I spent some time looking over studies, and it's very, very interesting about the accuracies between the iOS scanning and photogrammetry. But again, tonight we're not going to get a whole lot into those kind of details. So, as far as on surgery decisions, if you're doing freehand, quickly, I don't want to spend too much time on these things. Freehand just means that you're going without a laboratory fabricated surgical guide. Maybe they could give you a guide like you see down here, where A is at least telling you, hey, doc, the teeth are going here. So trough it out, and you're free to put those implants anywhere within the alveolar bone as you see fit. But just know this is where we're going to be putting teeth to meet this patient's aesthetic and phonetic needs. Guided surgery, then, as we know with guided surgery, it's going to give you guided depth and rotational control. Then the fully guided modified alternative. This is what we're seeing. This is starting to grow, I think, a lot of popularity, even with our experienced clinicians who've been doing free-handed. This is a good alternative when you do have that challenging case where you're getting what we call a modified, we call it Simply Guide Plus within the company, but you're going to get guided bone reduction and guided implant placement. And those are, really important things to have. And I would say for those of you more in the beginning stage, if you don't want to do the full blown, what I'm going to show you next, full guided surgical protocol, this would be as like a minimum way to go. And it takes you up to the point of your implants are placed, bone reduction's done, your MUAs have been placed, guided place, far as visual guides that we make for this particular protocol. So that's an option. When it comes to the provisional or the definitive, again, you can follow any type of protocol. You can even do analog if you'd like for that. When it comes to fully guided, this is what we're talking about. Everything is going to be guided. Your bone reduction, the osteotomies, the implant placement, the abutment placement, and then very importantly and uniquely with fully guided prosthetics is the actual placement of the provisional, as you see in the bottom couple of slides here, is guided because it's pinned into a bone foundation guide. So that makes it very predictable as well. And when you look at a fully guided, there's a lot that comes with it. So we're not going to go through all these items, but we have a lot of other PowerPoints. I take you through each one of these step by step on a model. And I encourage you, we'll talk about that at the end of where to go to get more information that's available on YouTube right now, just getting some of the links. Um, so this is what you're getting in a fully guided prosthetics. You're actually getting two of the provisionals, long-term provisionals. You have an option of doing less to save a little bit of money if you'd like. So let's talk about photogrammetry. Some of you this might are still maybe learning about this, maybe have some misunderstandings about it. What photogrammetry uh, does is it gives you the most possible accurate positioning of the implant slash MUA because you're scanning these with an MUA on top of the implant. So you get implant position as it relates to the other implants within the arch, kind of the XYZ reference. So it is extremely accurate, within 5 to 10 microns of accuracy. So this is where the photogrammetry it takes us to that level we've never seen before. Now, but it only gives you the reference of the implants to each other, not to within that particular arch, not into the oral environment, not to relation to the provisional, to tissue or anything else. So it does not capture required data that's going to be needed from the laboratory for a working arch, the dentition, the tissue of the working arch, opposing arch dentition, your bite, and et cetera. You still are going to have to use your intraoral scanners for that. So you have to have intraoral scanning. You don't have to have photogrammetry. So don't think that if you want to do full arch digital that you have to have that. So um, this is just a look at some of the units out there. We work with pretty much any workflow that you currently have, doctor. We're able to work with that. If you don't have a workflow, we can help develop one with you and for you. So here's just looking at some that are probably the more common ones that are out there. And what you're going to see on the day of surgery, you're seeing on the right here where the scan bodies, kind of like GPS markers, if you will, different configurations based on the system that you're using. You can use these whether it's a guided surgery or free-handed surgery. And what's going to happen during surgery is that while you're scanning uh, in real time on the laptop that's just off to the side of the patient, you're going to see these scan bodies start to appear. And based on the system you're using, maybe those things will start turning green, goes from yellow to from red to green. Different systems again will have different indicators. Either way, it'll tell you when you've captured enough of the data and your scan is complete. Some of these scans with photogrammetry, literally 10 seconds to 20 seconds, sometimes a little bit more. But it's very quick, very easy from a user perspective. So, like I said, kind of the benefits, it is the most accurate. Where it really does play a really good role is when you have divergent posterior implants, which, gosh, we have that so often, don't we? We're trying to either avoid the sinus, we have a numerated sinus, so we're doing that, or maybe mandibular, trying to not go past the mental frenum. So we might look at keeping everything between mental frenum and mental frenum with our implants. But when you start getting things posteriorly, it's hard sometimes with the iOS scanner to get that far back and get real accurate readings. Still very doable. We're going to show you ways of doing that. Um, but there really is less chance of user error with these units. And again, the scanning time is very minimal. Potential drawbacks. Again, I mentioned in the previous slide, it doesn't capture the anatomy that we need to actually finish the case. You always still have to do iOS scanning. And we're going to talk about precision scan bodies coming up here. And probably the biggest one for many clinicians is just strictly the cost of it. You need to justify your ROI, how many arches you need to be doing a month to make it worth your while. Um, then for utilizing this technology for a definitive prosthesis, This is actually a case that I'm documenting, the one on the left that we've been working on for several months now. Patients have been into their finals. You're going to see this patient throughout this presentation, but I am working on a very comprehensive, it's going to have modules to this presentation because it's the most in-depth I've ever done. Uh, and working with one of our real favorite clinicians that helped me with this case, Dr. Bennett Isabella, who is very versed in this technology and a good friend and mentor of mine. So, but this can be utilized at the final stage for your definitive. You still have to do your iOS scanning, but you're going to get the actual final precise position of those implants and MUAs. So let's talk about intraoral scanning. What we're seeing, some of the most common scanning mistakes, need to talk about this because everyone's wanting to do the digital, doing your intraoral scanning, which is great. And I think it's wonderful. But what happens, these are the highlights. These are the ones that are routinely happen. So you need to kind of pulse check yourself, doctors, and make sure your assistants are doing this. If you're leaving the room and let them scanning, uh, you know, this is available for record. I mean, this presentation will be available shortly. You can watch it again. Have your auxiliaries watch this, your assistant watch it, because these are some of the issues. The scanning bodies are not seated properly. Or if you're doing a lot of cases, you're mixing or you have misidentified the scan bodies of what system they come from. And that makes it very confusing for the software to read that properly and for the lab to do all the alignments between the different files that they receive. Big one is the inadequate scan body itself. Some of the scan bodies that people are utilizing, you can't use the ones, you shouldn't be using the ones you do for single unit implant cases or say a quadrant of implants. You need what we're going to talk about here shortly, precision scanning bodies. And they're going to be a little different than these tall cylindrical ones. The other thing is a big problem is the lack of cross-arching stitching accuracy. And it's a natural, I mean, it's not natural, it's an automated function, but it has so much to do with your scanning motion. And if you're not doing the proper scanning patterns, then what'll happen is it won't stitch properly and we can get double images. We just get inaccuracies is what it comes down to. Um, and also some of the times when you have a lot of soft tissue um, in an area, large tongue, etc., that can be a bit of a problem trying to work the scan around. Failure to splint or to verify inaccuracy. Some of these systems require luting the scan bodies together. If that's not done properly, that can be a problem. But you should always verify your scan accuracy before, take a good look at it, spin it around on your laptop before you submit it. Um, Here is a big one because if you have more than one assistant doing this, if you do it sometimes and one of your assistants does another and another one does another time, that causes some real issues. Even doing it yourself, the same, you don't always do everything the same, right? So it happens, but the more people you have doing it, there's more variables and more inaccuracies that can be embedded or incorporated into it. Another one is this, what we're finding out is that systems, iOS scanning systems that are more than, some brands maybe 2 years, but for sure more than about 3 years old, there's going to be some limitations and more challenges for you with that. So I would encourage you, it's like, I get it. I just bought this 3 years ago. I don't use it that much. Technology changes, it does, but it is for the better. But we do know, and I've been looking at studies recently, and that's where some of the big discrepancies are in some of these older units. They just don't have the technology. I mean, see the accuracies there. It's still very accurate, don't get me wrong, but not to the level that's available. Let's put it that way. So when we look at the scanning mistakes and look at some of the ones that really jump out at me that we see, happen a lot, um, these can be overcome by utilizing what's referred to as precision iOS. And precision iOS really is where we're utilizing specially designed scanning indicator scanning bodies that are, you see kind of the background there, You see here in the background, that's an example of a system that we utilize. We utilize quite a few. I'm going to show you three different ones that we use quite a bit within our NDX laboratory group. But these scans are required for, to complete a case. We need them for the opposing dentation, the bite, the working arch that we've talked about in capturing soft tissue. So I should say that what you may see in some of our literature, some of the webinars that you might go to online, we use a phrase simply iOS. We trademarked it. That's NDX's terminology for precision scanning. So I'm going to stick pretty much with the presentation tonight using the phrase precision scanning, precision scan bodies. But again, simply iOS. If you see that, that's the reason that you're seeing that. It's just something that we've trademarked that phrase. Um, so what we do know is that what they can help to ensure is to really get a very unified reference structure for accuracy, um, and reduces accumulative scanning errors because the geometry is pretty easy to pick up. It's very definitive geometry on these scanning bodies that it's you don't have to keep going over it over and over and over it so much, especially when you have taller ones. It's so hard to get the lingual palatal sides and the mesial distal some that are more posterior. Um, again, for extraoral scanning with some of the systems, utilize some, you're going to see this, that would be luting some of these bodies together with some frames and or luting material themselves. Then they can be scanned outside of the mouth. Then some of the systems as well, once they come out of the mouth, they've been luted in the mouth, they can act as a verification jig, which is a very nice thing to have as well. And the nice thing is pretty much these scanning precision scan bodies or scanning systems work with for sure, all the top implant companies and even a lot of the secondary, if you will, manufacturers. And it really does streamline your full arch digital workflow. So just know that you need to make the decision if you're going to do iOS scanning with full arch, you're going to need to make a decision on a system. So another decision you're going to need to make is how and who is going to deliver the provisional. And this one, sometimes I think people miss out on this. So what I mean by that is for the delivery of the provisional, let's say it's going to be on the day of surgery, how is it going to be done? In other words, will it be fabricated prior to the day of surgery from the CT scans, your iOS scans, with the in sequence fully guided, so to speak, system or a modified Simply Guide Plus? So, in other words, the laboratory has made it ahead of time. Um, is it that's where you're going to have it, or will it be printed in the office for the same day delivery, where the laboratory would create the STL files, they would do the designs and send that back to you, and you would print it in your office? I'm going to cover a lot of that coming up here. Um, or will it be fabricated by the lab from scans from the day of surgery? Then the lab that afternoon will fabricate it, print, stain and glaze, ship it that night. So the following day, the restorative clinician would seat the provisional, meaning the patient would leave that day without any teeth. They would have healing abutments, healing caps over the multi-unit abutments. But a lot of patients, they just want to go home and go to bed, and it hasn't really been an issue, but we're not going to get into those details tonight. I have a lot more details about that in some of the other presentations. Um, but another one is the who part of it. So if you're working in the team environment where we have the implanting clinician doing the surgery and a restorative clinician, um, are they going to deliver the prefabricated one, let's say from, if in sequence sent it to you with the kit? Who's going to deliver that? Do you need the restorative clinician there to do that? Will you be doing it, implanting surgeon, or will you have a lab technician there to support that portion of it? Uh, if it's going to be printed in the office, who is going to print it, finish it? And again, I'm going to cover that. I got some even videos on some of that. I think it's very cool coming up here in a little bit. Um, or will the restorative clinician deliver the lab fabricated provisional the day after the surgery, which I kind of alluded to that. which is becoming quite popular to do that. Um, Pretty simple, pretty straightforward for restorative doctor. They're just removing healing caps off the MUAs and dropping on the provisional. And boy, usually these bites are spot on, and the fit is really phenomenal. So that's been a real popular thing that we've seen happen. Or if you're going to go a little, I don't call this old school, but if you're going to do a converting of a denture, have you made arrangements to have a lab technician there to do it, or who's going to convert that denture into a hybrid? That's a whole nother fun game to do. So let's talk about next day provisional being a lab fabricated, or if you want a same day design where you can print it in your office. Either way, what's going to be required is you're going to have some preliminary scans and talk to your laboratory, communicate with your labs once again. 2 weeks prior is not uncommon, for labs to ask for that 10 working days ahead of time. And what they're going to need to do that for you ahead of time, they're going to need scans of the working arch. They're going to need scan the opposing arch and a scan of the bite. Now those are all the scans they need unless you're going to be changing the patient's vertical. And if you're going to be opening their vertical, which is not uncommon to do because patients many times that are candidates for this type of treatment modality have a closed or collapsed vertical, and maybe they need to be open 2-3 millimeters or more. And in software, we can open up the bite, but I tell you, there's nothing better than the old human articulator to do that. So, that might be something that you want to get is to scan the patient at the desired vertical with some type of an appliance to capture that. That's less, again, that helps to minimize some of the error. Now we got to decide too is for a next day provisional or same day design, what if you or the patient says, I want an entirely new smile design. I'm doing this because I hate my teeth. Or maybe they don't even have, maybe they're edentulous or their dentition, terminal dentition so broken down that you've got to, we don't have really a starting point. So to create a starting point, there's a couple ways to do it. You can take from pre-op photos, pre-surgical photos, I should say, the same difference. Is show us what the patient has currently. Can you communicate with us, doctor? And again, you're doing this ahead of time. This is a couple weeks before the surgery. Um, but what you provide in the lab, what are you asking the lab? You want to close the diastema? Yeah, it shouldn't be too big of a problem. You want the teeth lengthened. Lengthened. All right, how much? You want the teeth brought out. You want a wider arch. You want a minimum, maybe the buccal corridor needs to be increased or decreased. Do we have enough information here with their existing dentition to make those decisions to be able to provide you for a same day provisional um, design or for a next day delivery of provisional, that new smile for the patient? If not, then as a minimum, and I say this as a minimum, is you need to have some nice occlusal rims, not and these occlusal rims, you need information in these rims for the laboratory. And what you're seeing here is we've already had this determined to the proper vertical, the VDO for the patient. But we want to see in here the length, the incisal length of where those centrals are going to go. We want to see the midline. We want to see the high smile line. How high can that lip go? That's going to be very important. Talk about transition lines, seeing where that's going to be. And then the D is, where we start either the center of the canines or distal of canines, we start working with our buccal corridors. But we need to see that arch width. That also helps the laboratory in selecting the proper size of the mold for that patient. Ideally, though, I tell you what, if you need a starting point, um, take it to the level where we at least a wax try-in. Here, it's just been, you did a wash impression to stabilize it so you can do the FNS, the phonetics, check their occlusion, etc. But that's really the way to go. Now, when you have this, where you have teeth, that really tells a lab where things are going to go. The more precise, more information you give the laboratory, the better they're going to perform for you, and your patients are going to be that much more pleased with the end result. All right, so let's talk about the precision iOS technology here. So we're talking about day of surgery. Now, there's more than these three out here. These are three that we do a lot of work with. The left one is Truss. The one in the center is from Digital Arches. This is OptiSplint. The one on the right from Implant Direct is called Direct Scan. We'll talk a little bit, show a little bit more of this in a few slides coming up as well. But great systems. You just need to decide what works and what you're most comfortable with. Good people with these companies as well to help you with those decisions. You do have to also make a decision on reference screws. They're also referred to as fiducial markers. These are mandatory, and these are placed prior to surgery. I mean, once you numb the patient, then these are placed, and you need a minimum of two per arch. We get, I say greedy, but we like to see three per arch. But if you were doing submandibular arch like this, you definitely would put one each in the retromolar pad area as a minimum of two. The third one would be out somewhere on the buccal. You just need to make sure that when you place these, that if you're going to be using guided surgery where you have a bone foundation guide or some type of surgical guide, that they're not going to interfere with that. So that you need to be aware of where you're going to position or place these fiducial markers. This is an example of what you get from Dental Arches. They have a nice system. They have the smaller ones, different size ones, if you will, pilot drills that are kind of pre-depth, have stops on them for like pre-depth cutting, a little handpiece adapter that fits over the end of these, like a socket on a wrench for tightening them into place. But you're going to need some type of a system for a reference screw system. So when it comes to the actual, this is just kind of giving you a top and bottom perspective of two different systems here. Very similar in concept, putting the precision scan bodies in place, and then what point are you scanning, and then what point are you luting together. You see OptiSplint has a framework that is fitted that you real quickly can modify that to lute the frames together. Um, then again, just top and bottom reference, if you will. Truss going across the top. You want to reinforce them when they come out of the mouth. Always reinforce these because you'll be sending these to the lab. Um, it's a good idea to send them to the laboratory. The lab can still keep moving forward. They're not holding their case until they get these. With Truss, they actually comes a little kit, and it comes with it's a little bag of plaster, a little denture box, and you actually pour that up uh, and make a verification jig right there. You can do something similar with the OptiSplint. You don't have to pour a model with it, but they have a scanning plate that can be scanned again, and then that can be sent off to the laboratory. Then direct scan's a little different. This system, you don't have luting the components together. It's got some different, couple different options for them. I'm just showing you what the scans kind of look like. This is what the laboratory actually, the scan looks like from the laboratory when they get that. This was the case that we did with Dr. Isabella for our patient. Good friend of mine, and we did his upper and lower. We did everything to this guy. We did freehand. We did conversions of dentures. We did photogrammetry. We did a little bit of everything. So I'm looking forward to having that to present to you all in the future here. So then now that you've got all your data that you've decided on how you're going to, what your systems you're going to be using, then you're just going to upload all your information to the laboratory and making sure you communicate that any changes on the RX. Um, Now we need to talk about if you're going to want a lab for a lab printed finished provisional for a next day delivery. It could be a second day delivery, kind of just based upon getting everything into the laboratory. There's cutoff times that every laboratory is going to have to be able to do this for you, but this is a laboratory fabricated, really nice. They fit so well, the occlusion's so good. This is a nice way to go. But now let's say that you're making the decision, I want to do in office printing. So on the day of surgery. And that means that the laboratory then they're going to, you need the surgery in the morning, not the afternoon, folks. The laboratory then will, because they did the pre-designs already from the preliminary scans you sent, the smile design, all that's been done. What they're waiting for are your scans from the day of surgery. So now they can um, tie and orient all the scans together. And then this is what they'll send you. This is actually scans that we sent for the case to be printed to the doctor. When they opened it up, this is what it looks like. You send that to your printer. Um, Now, if you didn't make the cutoff time with your lab, you may not get that design, or you may not have time in your office to do it that same day, or you may not get it to the next day. So let's talk a little bit about this. I think there's a misunderstanding about in-office printing on what the process really entails. So there is a significant investment in the equipment. Even the resin materials are extremely expensive that print the provisionals. A big one is the benchtop area. People don't think about where are you going to put this equipment? I've been in a lot of your offices, and I'm sorry, but some of them are pretty darn small, and this takes some room to do this. And a big one is this right here. This is one people don't think about. Our laboratories that are doing these, it takes an experienced technician that pretty much does this all day long. It almost is about a 2 hour, an hour and a half, probably minimum process from the time it comes from, when you're putting it into the printer through the process. Yes, you have to sit there and watch it, but by the time that you program everything, it comes out, and I'm going to show you the other things that need to be done. But you're going to need to have light cure units, staining kits, glass bead unit to help clean off the film, if you will. That's probably not the best word for it. And you even need a wash station. I didn't have room to put that on the slide, but I wanted to show you this. This is actually how it comes out of a printer. I didn't know this until I saw my first one. That is a printed provisional from that scan I just showed you, and it's in all this goo, all right, the printing material. But now that has to be washed, but look what's attached to it. Now, I bet a lot of you weren't aware of that. And so this has to be cut off from the provisional. And when you cut it off, look what you leave these little nodules. And that's with all these systems. All those little nodules have to be removed. And look at the incisal edge as well. Okay. Then you also have where then someone, this will be your assistant or yourself, you need to be careful because it would be easy to change the shape of a tooth. A patient has high expectations and they round off the incisal edge, a corner doesn't look quite right. So these are things to think about. It's the time, it's the skill. Are you going to do it? Is your time better spent doing another case? Or if your assistant's going to do it, make sure they want to do it. This is a lot of pressure on them. And again, it'll probably take them 2 to 3 hours to do it. What are they going to be doing? What are they not going to be doing while they're doing this? Is another room going to need to be cleaned up? So these are the things that need to really be taken into consideration. It's the easiest thing to do is to buy the technology. I promise you that. The easiest thing to do is to buy all this equipment. So let's jump now to talking about the definitive prosthesis. Are we going to do an analog protocol? Hopefully you all are past that. Going to use precision IOS? What material are you going to use? Are you going to do a resin try-in? Will you incorporate photogrammetry for this as well? So hopefully I think most of you that are listening to me are probably because you're past this already. It's not to say you can never do that, but patients, such a nice thing we can do for patients these days. So the precision IOS, you could at this stage be utilizing your photogrammetry again here. This was actual, I got more showing you on this. So if you're going to do that for a resin prototype try-in, or let's say that everyone's happy with the provisional they've been wearing for the entire 4, 5, 6, 7 months, whatever it is of integration period, that you want to just go direct right to the final prosthesis, the definitive prosthesis, that's fine. So we did that on this case as well. This is one of the same patient, a lot of different things we did to our friend Tim. But here, utilizing the iCam, And but again, this was great. It gives us an exact position of after integration of where those implants specifically, precisely are in relation to each other within that arch. Okay, but you still need to do the iOS scanning with all that. Now, based upon is there changes need to be done? How much scanning? I'm not going to go into that. We have that on other presentations of the 5 different scans that you need. And if you have to do tissue adaptation, how do you go about doing that? But just know that you're still going to need to do precision scanning um, at this stage uh, as well. Now, why would you decide to do a resin prototype? So here's a case that, the reason most people are doing it is to check aesthetics, phonetics, the occlusion, especially in excursive movements, and how is it adapted? Because this is how the final would be, all right? So this would incorporate changes that you told the laboratory from on the RX, from any photos that you took, when they came in to start your first restorative appointment for the definitive prosthesis. So, but I want you to as you're looking at this, some of you probably already caught it, but let me just blow this up a little bit for you. Do you notice anything here? Anything catch your guy's eye? Y'all's eye? Absolutely. What is that? What happened here? Well, that is where the screw access hole, this implant, where it was positioned labally, either A, it was positioned fairly amount labally. I can't say too much labally because I don't know where the alveolar bone is. Maybe it's where it had to go, but it needed to have an angled abutment or a screw angled access type of abutment on that. But this is good to know because maybe in the provisional, the patient had said, "Oh, the teeth are too far out. I want to bring them back." And you told the laboratory that was part of your instruction to bring the teeth back. Well, when they brought it back, the implants don't move, obviously. So now we have an issue here. Well, isn't it nice to catch that right here? Because now, as a restorative doctor, then you know that on that particular implant site, you're going to have to change that out and put an angled, maybe a 17 degree if that was a straight abutment, maybe put a 17-degree MUA on that instead of a straight MUA so that it comes out the cingulum of that tooth. Or if it was a 17 degree, maybe you need to change that to a 30 degree. So but we really strongly recommend and encourage you to do a resin prototype try-in. Um, the other thing that's really wonderful for this, you got those picky patients, you know who they are. Um, they can have a test drive with it, and whereas they could wear it for couple of weeks, anyways, and make sure that they're happy, their spouse is happy. Now, if they're going to do that, I mean, if you're just doing it for the day of to verify it with the patient, you can save yourself a little money and not have the laboratory stain it. But if the patient's going to leave with it, they probably, may not want to look like this where they have white gums. So things, again, to decide about and talk to the patient about. But it can, so they can wear that to make sure everyone's happy. Once it goes to zirconia, there's no changing it. You got to start all over, and there's gonna be quite a bit of cost involved with that. So you do these steps. Don't skip these steps because the patient's going to forget you saved in one appointment, and you're going to forget that you saved yourself thinking you saved money because you saved one appointment when something comes back and it has to be redone, and you've lost your profit there. You know how remakes are, redos are. So, and you don't want patients are too important for the practice and for referrals. Let's just do the right thing for them. So let's say that if the decision is that, you want to take photos of that, that's great. It's optional if it's minor changes. It's very critical, though, to take photos of it in the mouth if there's major changes, and then, define that, explain that to the lab, or even set up a time with the laboratory to talk to them about it. Um, if you decide if scanning about scanning the bite, you do need to do that. If you did occlusal adjustments on that try-on, that resin prototype try-on, if you adjusted the occlusion, you must scan the full arch of that. And then I would suggest go ahead and take a new bite as well. Scan a new bite beyond just scanning the occlusals for that, because we've got to capture that for the laboratory. And of course, note any of the changes on the RX itself. You need to also decide if the tissue adaptation was inadequate. So what if the prototype is seated and you know what, you still have gaps there, or maybe the transition line is not in the right position yet. So if so, then you know you're going to have to take at least two scans. You want a scan of the prototype seated in the mouth, and then we want to have a scan of the exposed MUAs as you see here. The reason for that is our file that we have has the integral side, the provisional on the resin prototype, unless for some reason you did any adjustments to that. Um, but if you did, then you would need to scan the integral side of that as well, or of the provisional. In that case, out of the mouth, just do a 360 scan on it. Again, I'm not trying to get too much into procedures here tonight, but just know that you need to look at decisions about how is the adaptation of that. If they're going to wear this as a test drive, don't do those scans till they come back from it because there may be something else that might need to be modified. So do these after they come back from their test drive. Um, then, you know, you could return that to the laboratory. They'll do their lab bench scanning on it. Um, if there was no adjustments, you literally could just inform the lab that says, hey, everything looks great. Let's just go to the final. Don't need to send anything in. So let's say that if everyone's happy, there's no adjustments, and you want to go from your resin prototype try-in to the laboratory. Like I said, you can just let the lab know, hey, great job, folks. Let's just go to final, whatever that is. And so this is Tim's case here. We did, like I said, we did both top and bottom on him. We did zirconias. We're having them go through checking, you know, we already did it in the resin prototypes where we did excursive movements because we want to do very little adjustment, if any at all, on these finals. So this is another benefit of doing the resin prototype. Very beneficial to do that. So now we're in our home stretch here. Your decision is, you know, what are you going to use? What are you going to fabricate? Have the lab fabricate for the definitive prosthesis. So some key decisions, and it's not limited to these, you're going to need to make are about inner arch space. So again, this is thinking ahead of time. You don't want to wait to decide what the final, your definitive prosthesis is going to be the day of surgery or after surgery. You want to be talking about this ahead of time because the other thing you want to know is when you're talking with your laboratory, we talk about inner arch space. It's also referred to as a restorative space. Are you measuring it, or are we make sure when you're talking to the laboratory that we're measuring from the platform of the implant to the occlusal plane per arch, or are we measuring from the top of the multi-unit abutment to the occlusal plane in each arch? So restorative space can be measured two different places. You need to make sure you're on the same page with your laboratory. You're going to run into some challenges there. So it's very critical that you have that clarification with your laboratory, again, ahead of time, the communication part of this. The other thing that's going to be a decision maker is the restorative materials. Some materials need more inner arch space, sometimes by as much as 3 to 4 millimeters more. Um, then also you want to look at what is the opposing dentition that the patient has that this new prosthesis is going to be, things to take into consideration. So the other thing, you know, parafunction, bruxism, the physiological and biomechanical conditions, so to speak, number of implants, all these things all kind of come into play with the final prosthesis. I'm going to hit a little bit of these. I want to get time to go over each one of these in just a couple minutes here. But again, patient expectations, cost. If you already quoted the patient a fee, just know, and most people do like a global fee, if you will. Well, let's say from, you know, this is your fee for, and you already figure what your final prosthesis is going to be. But if you plan for, say, an acrylic hybrid over a titanium bar and find out there's not enough restorative space for that particular patient, that it needs to go to zirconia, that could be a couple $1,000s cost from the laboratory to the clinician more. So, you know, you got to just know someone's got to pay that difference. So that's why it's important to know these things ahead of time, and also about home care. So let's dive right into these. This is really what we're looking at as probably the four most common type of uh, options for your definitive prosthesis. And we're going to take each one and just hit some high points on it. So the one we've been doing for years and years have been, kind of referred to as a DTA with a bar, denture teeth and acrylic with a titanium bar, different variations of it. This also doesn't have to have denture teeth. It could have, it could be a printed denture, be monolithic from that perspective. Key considerations you see here, things to help you make decisions about it. The benefits, it's less expensive of them, repairable. By the way, if it does, if something's going to wear, the teeth will wear, which that's all replaceable. So in situations maybe with parafunction, this could be maybe beneficial based on to the degree of that. Then you have to watch about occlusion. You'll need night guards and things like that. Uh, I think the biggest drawback for this really is you still have a potential of teeth fracturing off, stain building up, plaque. It's a denture, really, for most practical purposes. Um, and it does require the maximum amount of intra-arch space. Zirconia, this is probably we're probably doing about 40% of the finals, maybe, or even more, are zirconia. Um, it requires the least amount of inner arch space, which there's a benefit with that. You just have to watch out for some clacking noise when you're doing a double, if you're doing a double arch. The zirconia is like taking two coffee ceramic mugs and clicking them together sometimes. But for hygiene, very much easier for the patient to maintain that. Um, Nanoceramic is another option. A lot of people are doing the nanoceramics. Um, the nanoceramic, it's repairable, which I think is a real good benefit. They chipped a tooth. You just use your flowable composites and repair that literally in the mouth. The drawback is that it still can have some staining on it. The material, it'll have an optical glaze. The labs will do a light cure glaze on it. That glaze needs to be replaced, maybe, redone once a year, once every couple of years, depends on the patient themselves. And then the last one, and we're in our home stretch here, is going to be what we refer to as a thimble crown, where we'll have 12 individual zirconia crowns. You can ask for Emax crowns. There's an upcharge for that, but these are individual crowns, very aesthetic, really a nice high-end restoration, is the highest cost of them. And so what I would like to say at this point, really, thank you. Thank you for your time.